Welcome everyone to another edition of Willow's Weather Briefing. Today is Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. Today we have severe weather potential over here in the southern plains. It's very gloomy over here in the northeast and cold associated with this low pressure system that's spinning up here. We also have above average temperatures across the southern United States, especially portions of southern Texas and the Florida Panhandle. We also have heavy rain and flash flooding expected around the Ozarks from the Central Plains to the Ozarks starting tomorrow and continuing off into early next week. Overall, looking at satellite, we do see this low pressure system, but generally pretty clear across much of the United States. Here's our new drought monitor updated today, pretty much looking similar to previous times. We have a persistent drought here in central California, also this little portion of Michigan up here, and also around the Delmarva region and the Florida Peninsula. Here's our current watches and warnings. Pretty quiet across much of the United States, but we do have this frost advisory and freeze warnings here in the northern plains and into the upper Midwest over here in the northern tier of Minnesota. We do have some lingering flood watches over here near Delmarva. Up the northeast, we do expect cold, gloomy weather over here in much of the northeast. Here's our surface analysis today. We have a low pressure system that we saw on satellite right here around the Ontario region, and we also have a broad high pressure building over here in the northern plains. We're going to have multiple rounds of surface responses around here in the central to southern Rockies, which will bring severe weather, but a significant, not really, but persistent, yes. We have a severe weather risk here associated with this meager low pressure surface response. And this high pressure system over here in the Midwest and Northern Plains will continuously try to shunt the moisture down south, but because of the consistent low pressure responses over here in the plains, we're just going to keep pushing some of that moisture, keep trying to push some of that moisture into the central to southern plains. So here's our first risk of this particular severe weather sequence in that region. And day two, kind of a similar look. The high pressure continues to build, tries to shunt that moisture down, but we will have low pressure systems. In this case, tomorrow, we have the low pressure response over here in eastern Colorado, which will bring severe weather over here. We will have a skinny area of moisture return that's going into the high plains, central high plains around here, but the flooding risk will continue or start to build over here near the Ozarks and vicinity because of the consistency of the high pressure and kind of this battle, actually, of this moisture trying to shunt down because of this high pressure system and the moisture trying to move on up because of the low pressure responses at the surface. Day three, continuing that story, high pressure building over here, trying to shunt that moisture down, but no, consistent low pressure continues to move it up. Severe weather over here expected on day three, Saturday, in areas like Oklahoma, and an expansion of that flooding threat because of this constant battle of moisture return here. Here's our excessive rainfall outlook. We have a marginal risk over portions of New England, accumulations possibly exceeding 3 inches over, albeit over an extended period of time in areas such as Boston. We also have a marginal risk here in Florida associated with pretty much classic summertime thunderstorms, especially in the Miami area. Over 3 inches expected, centered over southeastern Florida, such as areas near Miami. Also a marginal risk along the river here. Accumulations over 2 inches associated with convection today. Day two, slight risk kind of centered around Joplin, Tulsa area. Again, associated with that battle of moisture return, what we're getting here, consistent convection going to train over this region. Day three, the slight risk expands associated with the continuation of that flash flooding threat. Soils will moisten and increase your flash flooding threat, which is why we have a slight risk just expanding until Sunday. Full slight risk expanded all the way over the Red River Central Southern Plains area. towards the Ozarks and Middle Mississippi River Valley. Day 5, expansive marginal risk over these areas as the low pressure responses sort of start to mitigate a little bit around the Rockies, and we will start to get a cold front sweeping through this region. Here's our day 1 fire weather risk. Elevated fire weather risk over areas such as central Arizona and western New Mexico. Day 2 fire weather outlook. Critical fire weather risk for similar areas. And then day 3 through 8. Day 3 fire weather risk. Critical fire weather risk for areas such as Flagstaff, Sedona, Winslow, and Sirocco. Here we go. We have a slight risk of severe thunderstorms around the Red River today, primarily for a significant hail risk along these areas such as Dallas-Fort Worth, Arlington, Plano, and Garland. We also have an associated wind risk with this as well, and a small tornado risk. Tomorrow we have a slight risk over the central high plains over here associated with a non-significant wind and hail risk. No tornado risk is expected, simply because these storms are going to be too elevated to really gain any surface-based instability, which is very, very important for a hazard like tornadoes. Over here, day 3 centered a slight risk around central Oklahoma, cities like Oklahoma City, Norman, Edmond, Midwest City, and more, all centered around the Oklahoma City area. This also includes cities like Elk City up here in Enid, Oklahoma. Again, this is kind of expected to be elevated storms with the primary hail risk, but tornadoes cannot really be counted out, especially early on when we get those better low-level lapse rates and low-level instability. So a tornado cannot be counted out, but definitely is not going to be our main hazard that we look at. Probably going to be hail and wind. Day 4, kind of a similar story, 15% slight risk over areas of the western Red River Valley, areas such as Wichita Falls, Lawton, Duncan, Altus, Chickasha. Again, these storms are forecasted to be elevated, but perhaps later on in the severe weather sequence, we might get better low-level lapse rates, which might be a little bit more conducive for tornadoes, but it is a bit too early to tell. Again, I expect the main severe weather risk of this area to be hail. Here's our heat risk map. Still lingering heat over portions of the southwestern United States, and especially areas such as Texas and the Florida Panhandle here. So temps are supposed to continue to build late this week into this weekend, and then sort of start to finally deplete by early next week. So if you look at an area such as San Antonio, we've been using the city a lot lately. Temps in the high 90s, lows in the mid to high 70s across the week today. So lingering heat will continue this area, above average temperatures, about 10 degrees above average for this time of year. Some elevated heat risks across Miami, mid 90s across the period, and lows in the upper 70s and possibly even low 80s, which will bring little relief overnight to the heat over here, with temps reaching up into the high 90s. So significant heat expected in portions of southern Florida, possibly record-breaking, and that will continue on. The heat in Florida especially will continue on at least until midweek next week. This also includes areas such as Tampa and Orlando, but the main focus of this heat risk is going to be the urban areas, which have little to no overnight heat relief, and that will include cities like Miami, Tampa, Orlando. Here's our extended range hazards outlook. Hazardous heat across southern Texas, and also a flooding risk across these portions over here, stretching from the central to southern plains all the way up into the mid-Appalachians. Here's our 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. Above average for much of the western United States, below average for much of the southern United States except portions of southern Florida. 6 to 10-day precipitation outlook below average for much of the northern United States and above average for much of the southern United States. Let's go ahead and look at some of our modeling. Here's our GFS, sort of this broad upper level low up here, bringing very cool temperatures across the Northeast and upper Midwest. We have a ridge building into the southwestern United States, which will continue to bring above average temperatures for portions of the desert Southwest and into Texas. A ridge will continue to move on to the east, and we sort of have enhanced flow impinging onto the Rockies for multiple days, which could bring or which will bring multiple rounds of lee cyclogenesis, which will try to bring that return flow up here into the central U.S. But we do have that high pressure system that is continuing on building up here in the Midwest to Northern Plains region, which will try to shunt that moisture down. So we have continued ridging across the southern United States, which will bring kind of above average temperatures, but eventually we will see a cold front to move down to the southern United States, at least by midweek next week. So let's go ahead and look at our surface responses here. Low pressure system over the eastern Great Lakes region, and we also have a low pressure system that's sort of baroclinically being generated over here in the Northeast, which will probably bring some additional precipitation into areas such as New England. We also have that high pressure starting to build here. You can see semblances of it over here in areas such as the Central Plains, which will again try to shunt that moisture, but we do have continual responses like this across the Rockies, bringing that moisture up. We will kind of see this call and response of the high and low pressure systems trying to shunt and bring the moisture up respectively. So again, here's another response of the low pressure here on Friday. Another response on Sunday here. And then finally, we kind of get that, a more lackluster surface responses starting mid next week. Again, high pressure continues to build up to the north, will most likely bring fair weather in these regions. Let's look at our temperatures over here on the GFS. Again, very warm temperatures across the southern United States. Temperatures reaching well into the high 90s here, much below average temperatures here in New England. Temperatures only going up to the 40s up in the peak heating areas. So Northern Plains still kind of below average into the 60s during peak heating. And that sort of general pattern will continue off. Heat again in the south on Saturday. Cool temperatures up here in the north. That pattern will sort of continue off. We will get a warming up by early next week, but just marginally here in the southeast, or in the northeast, sorry. And then we'll sort of continue this pattern into early next week. Looking at our temperature anomalies here, you'll see below average temperatures for much of the northeastern United States, high temperatures for much of the southern United States. Pattern continues off into late this week. And then sort of a little bit return to normal-ish temperatures by early next week. We do see a semblance of well below average temperatures for areas just the Central Plains into the mid-Mississippi River Valley and off into the Midwest. So those cool temperatures will continue off, impinging or being more widespread into the eastern United States. let's just take a look at our moisture return real quick, just to visualize what I've been talking about. So we have this northerly flow from the north. We have the southerly flow from the Gulf, which will continue to bring training thunderstorms into this boundary right here, the stationary front slash warm front. That's going to continually bring thunderstorms and encourage that flash flooding risk just downstream. And then once again, we see a shunting of the moisture, but southerly transport of that moisture back up as we get those surface responses over here. So that is going to be it for today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment down below if you have any constructive criticisms. And if you would like to hear more weather briefings in the future, please subscribe. And of course, if you want any specific information regarding your area, please refer to your local broadcaster, National Weather Service meteorologists. Thank you and have a great day.